what I love about not only what I do, culture makes for interesting twists on, the loner, waspy, white guy, drunken, divorced. That's been done as well as it can be done. So I sort of enjoy any take on that. I enjoy S.J.'s Chinese detective, and not stereotypical Chinese, but Chinese, and you're actually learning about her.
I agree entirely. Listen, I just bought a caper to publish called The Fiddle Game. It was Jonathan Kellerman, who's the only luthier I know, and I only found that out by accident when he was doing an event with me. We talked about it. But it's set in the Twin Cities, and it involves gypsies and Jews and Nazi guards and the famous gypsy fiddle scam. And I love it, because it's something. It's sort of like Joe Gore's and Jonathan Kellerman, crossed hands.
Anything that teaches you, is great.
Or you can learn something new. So Soul Patch is set in Coney Island. You've brought Mo back to where this wonderful moment in his career, the peak detective moment. And you've given him a case that looks like it's going to go tragic. And he's back with a couple of his colleagues, and in fact, that leads to grief.
Right. Well, the past is best in the past. And Mo, unfortunately, not for him, but not for us, lives a lot of his life in the past. He does. And which I think many people do. They look the past as what is alive and happy for them. For Mo, the past is alive, but not necessarily happy.
Well, the past is prologue, is what we often think. But what you're saying is that the past is it for him.
Yeah.
Got it. And he's also having a hard time here with Katie and his marriage, or maybe just himself, and that's impacting.
I think the implication is more that it's himself he's having the trouble with. I mean, I've been married for 20-something years. Marriage is one thing when it starts. It's another thing when you have kids. Marriage is a whole series of things. It's not just one thing.
Right.
And my wife and I have had 2 kids, and we've struggled, and we've gone through that, as I write in the book. They'd hit that inevitable streak in marriage when every day feels like a long drive through Nebraska. It's just the same. No knock on Nebraska.
Right.
Because I've driven through it. But that's what it feels like. And it's not anger. It's not, in fact, it's not any strong emotion. It's just the plains. And every day is like the next.
But you know what? It's hard to lead every day as an exceptional day.
Right.
And that's where you get the Nebraska effect, is that everybody needs some flat days.
Right. But the thing is, I think, which you caught on, is it's not about Katie, and it's not about the marriage. It's as much about the wine store as it is about...
Well, yeah, I thought Soul Patch was... The reason I thought it was interesting in a lot of ways was that you brought him back to where he had this great moment as a detective, and now he's trying to find himself again. This is kind of almost like a coming of age book, but a coming of middle age, where here he is. He's got the wine store, he's able to go off and detect, and yet none of it's quite working for him.
Right.
And so he's looking for himself again.
Right, and he finds something he absolutely doesn't expect to find, but you have to read the book.
That's true. Well, we won't give that part away. Now, a couple of other points I wanted to bring up. You have written some short stories. You've got one in These Guns for Hire.
Yes.
Which is a kind of a hitman.
It's a hitman anthology.
Except that someone stole the hitman. Was it Larry that swiped the title? I think it was, actually.
No comment.
Okay. But anyway, I think it was Joe Conrath that edited
he did.
These Guns for Hire, which was great. And then also there's an anthology that you edited called Hard Boiled Brooklyn,
That's right? There. I think it's the prettiest looking of all the... I mean, you may agree or disagree about whether the stories are the best. I happen to think the stories are great. But I think it's the best looking of the anthologies. And that was purposeful. The outside cover design is beautiful, and there's an individually drawn sketch for each story.
You mean in the interior?
But before each story, I hired at Bleak House, and I hired an artist to do individual sketches for each story.
I read these things as they come to me from the publisher and their little paper wrappers,
Right.
and I almost never see a finished book anymore.
Yeah.
So sometimes Jonathan Santlofer's new book
Yeah.
is absolutely gorgeous in 2 colors, and it's got all the police artist
Right.
sketches in it and all. But that isn't what I get to see.
Another friend of mine, I mean, the New York writers, generally the New York crime writers, are actually quite a tight bunch.
You are.
Yeah, I mean, I had a launch party for Soul Patch 2 weeks ago, and everybody was there from Gabriel Cohn, who you mentioned, to Lee Child. I mean, Lee Child, the last thing Lee Child needs to do is to show up at my launch party, but
You know
there
what?
he
Lee
was.
Child is what the British call a clubbable man.
He is a great guy.
But a clubbable man means he's a social guy, and he likes to do stuff like that.
He's a great guy.
He is a great guy. He's going to be here in a couple of weeks, and I always I'm very proud of the fact that he has signed every single book at our store.
I'll tell you, he is by me, he's a mensch.
He is a mensch.
He's a mensch.
I find it so funny that a man from Birmingham, England, is writing the quintessential American Western in detective
Well, that's
form.
what I said. I said, we did a panel last week at the Edgar
Right.
Symposium, and I was the moderator. It was the usual standalones versus a
Right.
series. And, the bottom line is he writes serial standalones.
Well, he does. That's right.
Right.
He has to ride into town, clean
Right.
up the town,
He's
and ride
Clinton-
out of town.
He's High Plains Drifter.
Shane.
Yeah, Shane. High Plains.
I always
It's
look
great.
for Jack
It's-
Palance,
yeah.
over the hill there. See? Now, tell me what it is you like about short stories.
I think they hone your skills.
Okay.
I until 2 years ago, I'd never written a short story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, never written a short story. And it's this thing I have was the first thing I wrote. The first short story I ever wrote was published. It's in the Plots with Guns anthology. It's called Kaddish. It was the first short story I'd ever written.
Gosh, I would think a poet, you have to distill everything down to a
Well,
few
that's why I
lines.
could do it.
Okay.
That's why I could do it. I knew I could do it.
Sure.
I just hadn't had the opportunity. Let's face it, until the last few years, there hadn't been quite as much of an opportunity to do it. And then once I did it, I really liked doing it. I also have a story in Wall Street Noir.
Yes, and it got a starred review. I saw
Indeed
the
it did,
other
and
day.
they mentioned my name.
And it mentioned Twist's name, which
Right.
is how come I know.
Right.
But I was very proud of my girl Twist because we
Oh,
published her.
Twist, she's a mensch. She's a woman, but she's a mensch, Twist. She's great.
I think that Akashic series is a marvelous idea, and I thought Wall Street. I will mention Peter Spiegelman now.
No.
My turn is the editor of that, and I thought it was wonderful. Now, before we run out of time,
Right.
tell me who is Tony?
Tony Spinoza. Like I said before, I deliver home heating oil. And, writers are always told when they start out, as you know, write what you know about. Well, I was never a cop. I mean, I know cops. I never wore a uniform. I barely have ever shot a gun, but I write a detective series. On the other hand, I do still currently drive an oil truck. So I know one day it occurred to me while I was delivering oil, and I deliver oil for a COD basis, cash on delivery. So it's much less expensive that way. And part of our territory is not poverty, but sort of new Americans, Hispanic immigrants, and it's interesting to move through the neighborhood, and sometimes I'm like a ghost. Delivery people, no matter what they look like, no matter color of skin, and that's why it was highlighted to me, because I should stick out a little bit, but I don't. You are absolutely invisible. And that struck me. And how this came about was I wrote a short story called Invisibility. Just about the first chapter of this book, not the prologue, the first chapter is that story. And I read it at a library, and S.J. Roseanne came up to me and said, "There's a book there." I swear, that's how it came about. She goes, "Write a book. There's a book there."